In 1952, showing up late to a meeting could end your career. In 2024, showing up on time feels almost rude. Something changed. Not suddenly. Not obviously. But somewhere between the pocket watch and the smartphone, a habit that defined civilization for centuries quietly disappeared. This is the story of punctuality. How it was built, why it mattered, and exactly how we destroyed it. For most of human history, time was not something you measured. It was something you felt. You woke when the sun rose. You ate when you were hungry. You slept when it was dark. The idea of meeting someone at a specific hour was meaningless, because there was no reliable way to know what hour it was. Sundials existed, but they only worked outdoors in daylight. Water clocks drifted. Candle clocks melted unevenly. The concept of being late didn't really exist, because the concept of a precise, agreed meeting time didn't really exist either. This wasn't laziness. It was physics. Without synchronized measurement, punctuality is just a word. The first real push toward coordinated time came from the church. Church bells rang at fixed intervals. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. Suddenly, an entire town shared a common time signal. Not accurate, not synchronized, but shared. For the first time in history, you could agree to meet someone after the third bell, and both of you would show up within about 15 minutes of each other. That was considered remarkable precision. In the 14th century, mechanical clocks began appearing on the towers of European cities. They were not accurate by modern standards. The best clocks of the 1300s drifted by 15 to 30 minutes per day, but they did something no clock had done before. They divided the day into equal, countable, named hours. Suddenly, time had structure, and structure created expectations. Within a generation, being late began to carry moral weight. Not just inconvenient, but a reflection of your character. Medieval guild records from the 1400s show workers being fined for arriving late to their shifts. The idea that your time was also other people's time was born. By the 1600s, pocket watches had reached the merchant class. For the first time, individuals could carry time with them. And once time became personal, lateness became personal too. Philosophers wrote about it. Samuel Johnson called tardiness a form of theft, stealing from the hours of another person. Ben Franklin turned it into a proverb. Time is money. Waste mine, and you have stolen from me. The moral case for punctuality was now airtight. But the real transformation came in the 19th century. It came on rails. Before the railways, time was local. Every town ran on its own solar time, set by the position of the sun directly overhead. Bristol was 10 minutes behind London. Edinburgh was 13 minutes behind Manchester. That was fine when traveling between cities took days. But a train from London to Bristol took 2 hours, and 2 hours was not enough time for the timetable to absorb a 10-minute difference. Collisions happened. Trains running on different local times would occupy the same track at the same time. People died because of time zone confusion. In 1840, the Great Western Railway became the first company to adopt a single standard time for all its stations. By 1847, most British railways had followed. By 1880, Britain legislated a single national time, Greenwich Mean Time. One country. 1 clock. No exceptions. The United States followed in 1883, when the railroads themselves divided the country into 4 time zones to prevent further chaos. The government made it official in 1918. In a matter of decades, the entire industrialized world had synchronized, and with synchronization came a new kind of social contract. When you said 7 o'clock, you meant the same 7 o'clock as everyone else. Being early was now possible. Being late was now unambiguous. Missing it by 15 could mean losing your job. This filtered into every corner of social life. Dinner invitations specified 7 for 7:30, meaning cocktails at 7, dinner at 7:30, and showing up at 7:45 was an insult to your host. The military codified it into doctrine. Eisenhower's rule. If you are on time, you are late. If you are 5 minutes early, you are on time. Business culture absorbed it completely. A man who arrived early was seen as serious, disciplined, trustworthy. A man who arrived late was seen as chaotic, disorganized, disrespectful. Studies from the 1950s and 1960s showed that the single most common reason given for not hiring a job candidate was lateness to the interview. Not qualifications. Not experience. Lateness. Punctuality was not just a habit. It was a signal, a social language. A way of saying, I value your time because I value you. And then something started to shift. The car didn't kill punctuality, but it cracked the foundation. When you walked to an appointment or took a fixed schedule train, your arrival time was predictable. The train arrived when the timetable said, your legs moved at roughly the same speed every day. But a car introduced variability, traffic, parking, accidents, construction, detours. Suddenly, the journey between 2 points had a range of possible durations instead of a fixed one. The first recorded use of traffic was bad, as an excuse for lateness appeared in American newspapers in the early 1930s. Within 2 decades, it was the most common explanation for arriving late in the United States. The car gave lateness a cause. An external one. One that wasn't your fault. And once lateness had a socially acceptable external cause, the moral weight of it began to lighten. If the traffic could make you late through no fault of your own, then being late was no longer purely a character flaw. It was just a thing that happened sometimes. The home telephone arrived in the late 1800s. But it took until the middle of the 20th century for it to quietly transform our relationship with punctuality. Before the telephone, if you were going to be late, the other person had no way of knowing until you failed to appear. Your lateness was silent. An absence. A blank space where you were supposed to be. After the telephone, you could call ahead. Warn them. Apologize in advance. Give an updated time. This seems like an improvement. In one sense it was, but it had a subtle, corrosive side effect. The phone call converted lateness from a failure into a process. Instead of arriving on time, you could arrive late and make it acceptable by communicating that you would be late. The expectation quietly shifted from arriving on time to informing people when you wouldn't. Punctuality was no longer the standard. Communication was the standard. And communication was easy. Everything before 2007 was a slow drift. What happened in 2007 was a cliff. On June 29, 2007, Apple released the first iPhone. Within 18 months, smartphones were in tens of millions of pockets. Within 5 years, they were universal, and they changed the calculus of lateness in a way no technology had before. The smartphone did not just let you call ahead when you were running late. It let you text. It gave you Google Maps. It gave you live traffic updates. It gave you Uber, so you could summon a car from wherever you were. It gave you the ability to notify someone of your delay in real time, down to the minute, with a tracking link showing exactly where you were. The cost of being late collapsed to almost zero. Before the smartphone, showing up 15 minutes late meant leaving someone standing at a restaurant, not knowing if you were coming, not knowing if something had happened to you, not knowing how long to wait. That was a real cost, a real imposition. After the smartphone, showing up 15 minutes late meant sending a text that said, 5 minutes away, sorry! And then arriving 10 minutes later. The other person sat at the table, scrolling through their phone, inconvenienced but not stranded. The stakes of lateness disappeared. And when the stakes disappear, the behavior follows. The technology removed the external punishment for lateness. But research suggests the internal experience of time was already broken for a significant portion of the population. Time blindness. The inability to accurately sense the passage of time affects an estimated 15 to 20% of the general population at subclinical levels. Among people with ADHD, it affects the vast majority. ADHD diagnoses in adults have tripled in the past 20 years. Either more people have ADHD or more people are being identified. Probably both. But more relevant is what researchers call the present bias. A universal human tendency to weight the immediate moment more heavily than the future. Every person, not just those with ADHD, is wired to find it difficult to leave for an appointment that is 20 minutes away when they are in the middle of something that is engaging right now. The smartphone supercharged present bias. It filled every waiting moment with something engaging. Instead of sitting with the mild discomfort of being about to leave, which would naturally push you toward actually leaving, you could scroll for 5 more minutes, and then 5 more, until suddenly you were late. Dr. Hal Hirschfield at UCLA has studied the psychology of future self-perception for 15 years. His finding: most people treat their future self like a stranger. Not as themselves in 30 minutes, but as a different, abstract person. And it is very easy to be late on behalf of a stranger. By the 2010s, the shift had moved from behavior to culture. Social media began celebrating the chaotic, late, overwhelmed person as relatable. Memes about perpetually running behind went viral. The phrase, "I have no sense of time," became a personality trait rather than a problem. Being late was not shameful. It was human. In some social circles, being on time became almost awkward. Arriving exactly at the stated time meant walking into an empty party. The host wasn't ready. The other guests hadn't arrived yet. There was an unspoken understanding that the start time on the invitation was a suggestion, not a commitment. Event planners began building buffer time into schedules automatically. If you wanted the keynote to begin at 9, you listed it as 8:45 and expected most people to trickle in until 9:15. The stated time became a decoy. Restaurants in major cities reported in a 2019 survey that the average party arrived 11 minutes after their reservation time. Before 2010, it was 4 minutes. 11 minutes sounds small. But across a restaurant doing 200 covers per night, 11 minutes of lateness per table means the entire evening schedule collapses by 10 p.m. Not every culture moved in the same direction. Japan maintained its culture of extreme punctuality. Tokyo trains run with an average delay of less than 1 minute. In 2017, a West Japan railway train departed 20 seconds early, and the company issued a public apology. Germany retained strong punctuality norms in professional settings. Arriving 5 minutes early to a business meeting remains the expectation in Munich the same way it was in 1975. Switzerland never budged at all. But the English-speaking world, and increasingly the connected, smartphone-saturated world everywhere, moved steadily toward what researchers at the University of Amsterdam describe as elastic time, a zone of acceptable lateness that expands and contracts depending on context, relationship, and perceived importance. The result is that punctuality has become stratified. It is now a class signal as much as a character signal. Wealthy professionals are still punctual in high-stakes settings. Board meetings, court appearances, investor calls. Because the cost of being late in those rooms is still real. The people in those rooms have not lost their stakes. They just have staff to ensure they arrive on time. For everyone else, in every other context, elastic time has won. The economic cost of lateness is documented but rarely discussed. A 2016 study by the Harvard Business Review estimated that unplanned lateness to meetings costs U.S. businesses $37 billion per year in lost productivity. Not from the late person. Here's the thing. From everyone who arrived on time and had to wait, each minute that 10 people sit in a conference room waiting for the 11th to arrive is 10 minutes of collective time erased. At an average professional salary, a 5-minute late start to a 10-person meeting costs the company roughly $300 in wasted labor. Per meeting. The average professional attends 62 meetings per month. The math scales fast. But the economic cost, large as it is, may be smaller than the social cost. Research from San Francisco State University found that chronic lateness in close relationships, friendships, romantic partnerships, family, correlates strongly with lower relationship satisfaction and higher rates of relationship dissolution. The late person usually underestimates how their lateness is experienced. They see it as a minor inconvenience. The person who waited experienced it as a statement. My time matters less than yours. That message, repeated over months and years, compounds. There are small signs of a counter-movement. Some companies have instituted hard start policies. Meetings begin exactly on time, with or without everyone present. The social cost of walking in late is deliberately preserved. The 5-minute rule has gained traction in some corporate cultures. Any meeting that runs more than 5 minutes over its scheduled end time is declared over, regardless of where the discussion stands. This forces precision at both ends. Japan's influence on global work culture, particularly through the concept of kaizen and operational discipline, has brought renewed interest in time management as a discipline rather than a personality trait. And there is research suggesting that the desire for punctuality has not disappeared. It has been suppressed. A 2022 survey by the American Psychological Association found that 73% of adults report feeling stressed when they are running late, suggesting that the internal sense of time as something that matters has not been erased. It has just been overridden by circumstances, technology, and a culture that no longer enforces consequences. The norm changed. The feeling didn't. There is something that gets lost that is harder to quantify than productivity or relationship satisfaction. Punctuality is a form of attention. When you arrive early, you have given yourself a moment to prepare, to clear your head. Here's the thing. To be fully present when the other person arrives, rather than rushing in, still half somewhere else. The philosopher Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Being early is one of the simplest expressions of that generosity. It says, I was here before I needed to be. I waited for you. You matter enough that I arranged my morning around your arrival. That gesture has not become impossible. It has become rare, and things that are rare carry different meaning than things that are common. In a world where almost no one is early anymore, being early is a signal again. Not of discipline, not of military efficiency, not of Franklin's calculus about time and money, but of something simpler. You decided a person other was worth more than 5 extra minutes of your own comfort. That, it turns out, is still noticed, still felt, still matters. In 1952, being on time was average. Today, being on time is remarkable. Being early is almost unheard of. We did not lose punctuality because we stopped valuing time. We lost it because we built a world that made the cost of lateness invisible. We gave everyone a phone to announce their delay. We filled every waiting moment with a screen. We removed the silence that used to make being late feel like what it is. The taking of something from another person that you cannot give back. The hours we spend waiting for people who are not coming yet. They do not return.